In this video, I'm going to go over the anatomy of an American bullfrog. So I have two specimens here. We'll start out with this male specimen. All right. So we'll begin with a survey or a view of the external anatomy. On the head, notice that there's a very small nostril here. And then the eye, in addition to this sort of upper eyelid here, there's a little flap here of clear tissue. This is correctly called the palpebrum, although some books refer to it as a nictitating membrane. And then behind that, this large circular structure, this is the tympanum, which the bullfrog uses for hearing. So colloquially, you may know this as the eardrum. Now, that is a male. So just to compare it, if you look at the head of a female, notice how the tympanum is much smaller in a female. It's actually possible to rapidly sex male and female bullfrogs just by looking at the size of the tympanum. Okay, so we'll open up the mouth and take a look inside. All right. I cut this at the corners of the jaws before making the film to save time. So first, notice that there are two holes in the roof of the mouth. When we were looking at the shark, you noticed that sharks do not, their nostrils do not open into the mouth of a shark, and that's true of other fish as well. However, with a bullfrog and other tetrapods, the external nostrils or external nares are continuous with these internal nares, they're referred to as. And between these two nares, there's a couple of swollen white areas here. These are called the vomerine teeth. And so what you have is you have patches of teeth, usually on slightly elevated structures called odontophores. And they're called vomerine because they're attached to the vomer bone. Now, the other thing we can see in the dorsal surface of the mouth are there two holes in the back here. So these are the openings to the eustachian tubes. And the eustachian tubes are continuous with the ear canal. So the frog is able to use these to equalize pressure inside of the inner ear. Inside the middle ear, we should probably call it. Okay, now on the lower side of the mouth, all right, first notice this is the tongue. And unlike in us, the tongue of a frog is actually attached at the front. There's a set of muscles that run along the underside of the mouth and enter the tongue and extend up to the top. When those muscles contract, the tongue flips out. And that's what frogs use these tongues to catch prey. So it's usually covered in mucus and very sticky. So when a frog gets ready to grab something, it'll flip its tongue out and attach it onto the prey and then pull it in. Then it uses those vomerine teeth to help hold the prey inside the mouth until it swallows it. Sometimes it'll chew using those vomerine teeth. Now, there are mandibular teeth as well on the surface of the upper jaw. I'm sorry, maxillary teeth on the upper jaw. Okay. Now, let's see. So here we're looking inside what we call the buccal cavity. All right. Remember, technically, the mouth is just an opening. So the mouth is the edge of this opening, and the space inside, what a lot of times people call the mouth, is actually properly referred to as the buccal cavity. Now, towards the back, you'll notice a little slit here. This is the glottis. So that connects to the trachea, which goes down to the lungs. And then above it, we have the opening of the esophagus. In the back, probably I would say from the beginning of the glottis back, that area is actually referred to as the pharynx in a frog. So where you have the opening of the glottis and the esophagus, that's the pharynx, and then a short distance in front of that would be the buccal cavity. All right. Now, frogs usually have, they make calls, and they have a pair of vocal slits, which are on the sides of the lower jaw here, And those vary quite a bit in size and location. They're paired in bullfrogs. They're not always paired in other species of frogs. Some have single vocal slits, but usually vocal slits are paired and are in the floor of the mouth on either side of the tongue. All right. The underside of the throat, you know, it's extensible. Frogs don't have a nice diaphragm muscle like we do, and they use this buccal pumping mechanism to pull air in from the external nares, all right, or the nostrils, in through the internal nares, and then to push it down in the glottis into the lungs. So they actually use this buccal pumping mechanism to aerate the lungs. We'll see the lungs in a minute. Okay, so let's take a look at the internal anatomy of the frog. All right, so I have removed the lower side of the body here. You can notice that the abdominal muscles are relatively well developed. They attach along a line right down the middle, which is called the linea alba. And it may not look alba or white to you. That's because there's a vein there that's overlapping it. Okay, so let's take a look inside the body cavity. All right. Now, the frog has two divisions of the coelom. So again, we have sort of an abdominal cavity here, and then there's a pericardial cavity surrounding the heart. All right, so let's see. We'll take a look. You can see this large gland here. That's the liver. Remember, just like in the shark, the liver is kind of the largest organ inside the frog. And if I lift up the liver, you can find a greenish sac there. That greenish sac is the gallbladder. All right. Now, let me see if I can, actually we'll see if we can make this a little bigger so you guys can see this more clearly here. Okay. All right. So there's the gallbladder. Okay. Now this is the stomach. The esophagus is hidden up in there, but that would be the stomach. And kind of like in a shark, it's sort of J-shaped, but not quite. It stops a little early here. And notice there's a constriction there. So that is the pylorus. All right, it's a muscular valve that controls the flow of food into the first part of the small intestine. All right, now you may remember in a shark, you have a spleen hanging on the side of this organ. Notice that a frog doesn't have it in that location. So on the side of the stomach, there's no spleen. The spleen is in sort of a weird location in frogs. It's different from most other animals. You're going to see the mammals also have it in the same location as the shark. But if you'll notice there, you see this little round black thing? That's actually the spleen of a frog. All right. Now the intestine has got three main divisions in the frog. All right. This first part that's relatively straight, we call that part the duodenum. So the first part, which is straight, is the duodenum. And then there's a curvy part down here. All right, see where it starts coiling a lot? So there's a lot of coiling going on there. All right, so all these coils, this part is called the ileum. All right, and then there's a valve here that's sort of similar to the pylorus. It's called the ileocolic valve. And then this fat thing here, this is the colon or the large intestine. So the small intestine in a frog has got two parts to it. First part is duodenum and the second part is ileum. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at a few other structures. All right. So let's see, we'll start out here with some parts of the reproductive system. This little round thing is a testis. And there's usually a fat body associated with it. It's really small in this frog. I don't know, maybe it wasn't that well fed. Sometimes you'll see a big elaborate yellow thing here, which is the fat body. And then above that, can you see that there is sort of a brownish organ there? But look at this tissue. This tissue is the peritoneum. So notice the peritoneum actually covers that brown organ. That means that brown organ is not inside the coelom. It is in what we call the retroperitoneal position, and that is the kidney. All right. Now there's a urinary bladder here. Let me see if I can pull this thing up a little bit so you can see it better. All right, so this is a urinary bladder. It's somewhat deflated in this frog. And just like in fish, frogs have a cloaca. So this opening here at the top of the legs is actually the cloaca. You have both the waste from the digestive tract and the waste from that bladder I just showed you are excreted at this point. Okay, let's see what else we want to look at inside this frog. All right, so how about the pancreas? So the pancreas is kind of elongate in frogs. So you see this little flap here of yellowish stuff? That's the pancreas in a frog. Now let's see, this flap here, make sure people can see that. Yeah, this flap here, this is a lung. So there's a pair of lungs. There's another one hidden over here somewhere. There it is. You see that little flap there? That's the lung on the other side. Okay, what else do we need to cover? Okay, well, how about in front of the heart? So in front of the heart, in front of the liver, you have the heart. So here you can see the heart of the frog. It's encased in a thin membrane, which is called the pericardium. And that encases a small space, a small division of the coelom called the pericardial cavity. This white, or this tan part of the heart, that's the ventricle. As in the shark, it does most of the work. Now sharks, remember, just have 2 chambers in their heart, but frogs have 3. They have 2 atria. There's one and here's one. This one contains deoxygenated blood, and this one contains oxygenated blood. All right. The ventricle, though, does all the pumping. All right, so let's see. What else do we need to see? I'll just double check my list here, see if I've left anything out. Okay, the only thing I didn't show were some parts of the female reproductive system. So I will conclude this video at this point. We won't worry about the female reproductive system this year.